The Spill Sports Show. Matt Reynoldson.
I've always been told I have the face for radio, and now I'm making it happen.
David Eickholt.
It's utter blasphemy. It blows my mind.
Scott Ayers.
The next time they make the playoffs, I'll be running for president.
Kick off your weekend with hard-hitting sports talk every Friday afternoon from 1 to 3 on KRNU2.
Bring 'em out, bring 'em out, bring 'em out, bring 'em out. It's hard to yell when the barrel's in your mouth. Come on.
You're listening to the Spill Sports Show on KRNU2.
Just gotta do what I gotta do, and when I gotta do it, you know. So basically, just doing what I gotta do every time I step on the court to do what I gotta do.
Now, live from Andersen Hall on the UNL campus, here's Matt Reynoldson, David Eickholt, and Scott Ayers.
And child did that, put them in the aisle. Johnny the Jet Rogers just tore them loose from their shoes.
You believe in miracles? Yes!
Comes to LeBron, he takes a fadeaway for the win. Hey! Knocked it down!
There goes Davis. Oh my God! Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
You can't believe what just happened. What a time to be alive!
Hit me with the horn, 20. Yeah! Here we go now! 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 Check it out!
Welcome in. You're listening to the Spill Sports Show on KRNU2. From Studio A in Andersen Hall on the UNL campus, we're coming at you with live sports talk for the next 2 hours. Alongside David Eickholt and Scott Ayers, I'm Matt Reynoldson, and we're talking about the people that play games for money. As the great Tom Looney would say, it's the toy department of broadcasting, Sports Talk Radio. We've got a stacked lineup for you today, including our biggest guest yet. David, what's coming up in hour one?
Well, with National Signing Day just 5 days away, we have Athlon Sports college football writer Brandon Cavanaugh coming on in about 15 minutes to talk about how great of a signing day for Nebraska that could shape out to be a monster recruiting class for the second-year staff. We'll also have our preview of next week's Super Bowl and the Jordan Stevenson Tweet of the Week. Scotty, what's coming on for hour two?
Well, boys, Nebraska ball's still afloat even after last week's tough loss to Michigan. Can the Big Red pull the upset on the road? We'll also preview the Big 12 SEC Challenge and discuss why the Warriors proved more with the win over the Mavericks than they did against the Spurs. Later on, it's a pop culture spill, and we'll close with the final countdown. But first, Nebraska's recruiting class is really shaping up.
Just when it seemed Nebraska's recruiting class was dead in the water a couple weeks ago, doomed for a ranking in the 40s, a few big commitments have suddenly vaulted the Big Red toward a top 25 recruiting ranking. Guys, let's talk about this. We'll talk about possible signees with Brandon coming up in about 10 minutes. But first, who's one guy that stands out to you in this recruiting class?
Honestly, you could say Patrick O'Brien. I think a lot of people are going to say that because he's a four-star recruit coming out of California. But I'm going to go with another guy coming out of California, Markel Dismuke, a defensive back out of Compton, California, a four-star recruit. And he's a defensive back, which is really going to help bulk in this defense for the Boneyard, I should say, the Black Shirts. I think it's going to be huge seeing Dismuke play for the Nebraska Cornhuskers.
And Dismuke is the highest-rated prospect in Nebraska's class by rivals. The others have him at third and fourth best in the class, but it's generally consensus that he's a four-star prospect. David, who's one guy that sticks out to you?
Honestly, it's just a new signee that we just got. It's Matt Farniok. He's from Sioux Falls, South Dakota. He's 6'4", 297 pounds, and he was an underrated lineman in high school. And he was four-star, but I felt like he was a little bit under-recruited, for the 4 stars. And I think he honestly could come in next year and start. He's one guy that you definitely need to watch for because he's definitely a great sign.
Let's talk about Farniok a little bit. He's in that 500-mile radius. He's from Sioux Falls. Nebraska tends to rule the South Dakota area. They fight with Iowa and Minnesota for those recruits a lot, but it's general consensus, or at least to the people in Nebraska, that Nebraska should get most of the good South Dakota recruits. Farniok just signed Wednesday night after holding out for a long time, visited, I think, something like 9 times here.
Yeah.
Is offensive line coach Mike Cavanaugh rebuilding the pipeline here?
I think he definitely needs to. I feel like that was one of our weak points even last year. We need to make, if Tommy Armstrong starts next year, let's assume he does, we need to give him time, and that if he has more time to throw, he's going to easily become a lot better pocket passer than he's shown in recent years. And with a pro-style offense, I cannot begin to explain how important that is going forward.
And, it's tough when you make coaching changes. You're going to lose players to your pipeline. You're going to lose a couple pipeline states because players, they put their trust in Bo Pelini. He gets fired. Maybe they move on. So, yeah, I think it's huge to rebuild those pipelines that were so strong under Pelini. And Mike Riley's going to create his own pipelines. It's proven California is one that he is going after with 2 big commits, 4-star commits, in O'Brien and Dismuke. Yeah, I think this is a huge signing, and I'm excited for the future for the Nebraska Cornhuskers recruiting program.
Is this showing commitment to rebuilding the offensive line? Because we got 2 very, very strong offensive guards, 4 stars by most recruiting services. John Reardon is consensus 4-star by all the recruiting services and generally considered the best recruit in the class. Signed all the way back in September of 2014. He's from West Des Moines Valley, Iowa. Great player. Can he and guys like Farniok and guys like last year Jalen Barnett come in and really start to reassert the dominance that Nebraska once had with the offensive line?
I think so, and I think something that people should really start looking at is, yes, we have all these 4-star offensive guards, offensive tackles now. Think about this. We have also our future starting quarterback and Patrick O'Brien. It is unreal the amount of chemistry that these guys could build over the next couple of years, and I think that is extremely important going forward, and that's going to play a big key once we move on from Tommy. But I'm really excited just about communication and them developing together as a group instead of just each individual players. So
yeah, and it's not only key to help Tommy Armstrong, but we saw in that UCLA game, the run game really proved to assert itself. And I think with these big guys, Nebraska's going to try to run the football because that's where they found the most success in most of their football games. And you have to have a good offensive line in order to run the football. I think these guys are really going to help out the offensive line.
Well, you have to have a great offensive line to protect your quarterback, too. And new quarterback Patrick O'Brien is rooming with wide receiver Darian Grimm. They both enrolled early. They're both on campus right now, living right across the street from yours truly. What benefits do you think these guys will reap from enrolling early?
And, that's one of the huge things for these guys is they're going to learn the playbook, and that's huge for the young guys. If you can learn and understand the playbook, get some chemistry with the older players, it's really going to help out both Grimm and Patrick O'Brien. These guys, if they can build chemistry and learn the playbook early, they're going to have some great success here in Nebraska.
What I love is when quarterbacks and wide receivers do end up rooming together, because another thing is, you said chemistry. They get the feel of each other, how each other play the game, and it's not so much verbal communication. They just know what each other's going to do. That's providing big plays. That's whatever it may bring. But I love the fact that these two are rooming together because that's just going to help improve each other tremendously. Learn the playbook, spring practice. I mean, they'll be ready to go come come September. So.
Do we have a consensus who's the best commit in this class? I think it's Reardon.
I got to go Patrick O'Brien. It's too hard not to.
You kind of go back and forth. Obviously, we've got Dismuke, Reardon, O'Brien, now Farniok. And honestly, I can't make up my mind right now. Obviously, I love Patrick O'Brien. What he was able to do in California was just tremendous. I don't really have a consensus on who I think is the best player in this recruiting class.
The reason why I say Patrick O'Brien, I mean, obviously because he's our future quarterback and everything, but the fact he enrolled early, so he's already going to be ahead of the other guys once they come in. So he's already an advantage, and that just boosts him up for me.
They signed 2 new guys after Saturday's basketball game against Michigan. Kind of going off topic here a little bit, do you think the athletic department foresaw Pinnacle Bank Arena becoming this big of an advantage for the whole athletic department?
Honestly, Pinnacle Bank Arena, it draws in great attendance, and it's a beautiful facility. I think it's really helped out the recruiting process for Tim Miles and company. I don't know. Nebraska's becoming one of those teams because of its great facilities and a great coaching staff and great fan base. It's starting to bring in better and better recruits.
And what people don't really realize is the fact that players don't come in and just look at their own department. They come in, okay, let's look at the athletic department in full, because I cannot begin to tell you how many football players end up going to basketball games for their visits, how many basketball players end up going to football games. They look at the fan base, they look at how just the general athletic department treats them, and it's just really underrated that I don't think the casual fan really realizes the impact that they can have.
And they do. They show up. People notice that, and our basketball program has not been traditionally good. The aura of Pinnacle Bank Arena surrounds recruits, surrounds everybody, and the atmosphere at that Michigan game. I was sitting courtside. I could feel it all around me, and I can only imagine what recruits were feeling there, because you feel that at a basketball game. Imagine like 75,000 more people, and that's a football game, and they can feel that around them when they're playing. We got Colin Miller and Pernell Jefferson from that recruiting visit. We also had a couple 2017 guys with Keyshawn Johnson and Darnay Holmes out of Calabasas, California, visiting. Had a basketball recruit and Isaiah Roby visiting. He's already committed. This Pinnacle Bank Arena is a great selling point, even for recruits, just to say, hey, come to a basketball game when you're in the off season.
What I don't think people realize is Markel Dismuke's also from Calabasas, and it's just you need to have the connections at the high schools that generally produce top talent. So you need to use your own players as a huge recruiting source as well, and I think, again, that's extremely underrated. But Pinnacle Bank Arena is just another huge advantage for Nebraska, and I think if Mike Riley and co. can focus on getting the talent out of California, it's going to build us right back up, because California, as of late, has really, really been pushing out the top talent. I think it's starting to beat Florida, if not Texas.
And we'll see how this recruiting class shakes up. It could be a big signing day, but we'll preview that coming up next when Brandon Cavanaugh from Athlon Sports joins us. Stay with us. This is the Spill Sports Show.
Back to the Spill Sports Show on KRNU2. Don't forget to check out our podcast on thespillkrnu.wordpress.com in the hours following the show.
That's like re-releasing a Tupac album and giving him a Grammy.
Now, live from Andersen Hall on the UNL campus, here's Matt Reynoldson, David Eickholt, and Scott Ayers.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Spill Sports Show. College football National Signing Day is only 5 days away, and it takes a true recruiting whiz to keep up with the spinning carousel. Well, we have one here on the Spill Sports Show right now as we welcome in Brandon Cavanaugh of Athlon Sports. Thanks for taking the time to come on, Brandon.
True recruiting whiz. Well, thanks for having me on. Let's talk a little bit of recruiting. I mean, like you were saying, we are in the home stretch. And the Huskers are having one heck of a finish here, and I think for all Husker fans, they're going to love what's to come between now and signing day, and even what's on signing day. So,
absolutely, what's the outlook for signing day?
Well, it's interesting. It just got a media release, that there is going to be a signing day special on Huskers.com. At 8 a.m., they're going to be doing a little something here. Apparently, there's going to be, Mike Riley's going to be on it, including other members of the coaching staff. They're going to include features on the facilities, the athletic programs. I think I saw that they might have Patrick O'Brien and Darian Grimm, who are already signed and on campus, so we can actually talk to them and they can actually be a part of things. So that's at 8 a.m. on Wednesday, February the 3rd, and I believe that's on Huskers.com. Free to all Huskers.com, but so you don't have to be a part of Huskers Insider or anything like that. But as far as National Signing Day itself, I'm hearing there may be a surprise. I don't know whether or not anything's coming of this. When you have You have some spots open. You never necessarily know if they're going to be able to squeeze another guy in there. Maybe they have a room for a guy that they're looking at. Obviously, Nebraska right now needs another defensive tackle with Vince Valentine and Malik Collins both going to the NFL. Another DT would be good. So can they get that one at the last minute? There's a few names that are out there. Well, actually, there's more than a few names out there. But right now, there's some big names that are that have recorded videos for Bleacher Report that are actually going to be releasing those as of the 1st and I think 2nd of February, and those names are Lamar Jackson and Des Fitzpatrick, two names that should be very familiar to Husker fans that have been following recruiting lately.
Explain the impact of getting a recruit like Lamar Jackson or Des Fitzpatrick. What would that have on the perception of this recruiting class?
Well, it's a very good question. Right now, Nebraska is doing very, very well, especially for Mike Riley's first full recruiting class. This is off the transition. This is kind of his whole deal, except for a couple of people like Farniak. Matt Farniak, who just recently committed. He had an offer for like all of 2 years for getting on. But to answer your question, it's a big deal. Des Fitzpatrick would instantly become one of the best wide receivers, and that's saying something because Nebraska's wide receiver core right now is one of the best on the team. It's one of the best units on the team. So that would be major in terms of his ranking as well. If you're a stargazer, if you want to say, oh yeah, he's a 4-star. Composite 4-star using the 24/7 Sports Composite Index. Also, Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson is, I think, the tippity top. If you want to look at safety, he is, I believe, the best according to Rivals, number 5 according to 24/7 Composite, and he's projected to play cornerback, but I read something that said, well, what do you think about playing safety? He said, well, they ranked me number 1, so I'm not going to argue with them. So, hey, but the impact of those two guys, you got to say, okay, this is a team that went 6-7. Very obviously, we all know there were 4 losses by 11 points. It was a very slim margin of error there. But at the same time, a 6-7 season, coming off of that great win versus UCLA, but they're still managing to have all of this positive momentum after the fact. A lot of teams could go into that and just utterly die or have a so-so, ending to it, and maybe just have to hope that next season goes better. But fortunately, with the support staff and these guys that are going out there, these coaches, and especially Mike Riley going out there and busting his tail as well. Although I'm not going to say any of the assistants are doing any less. You go out there and you have that, and again, the support staff. I can't say any less of like Ryan Gunderson, Eddie Vaughn, everybody. I don't have time to list everybody's name, but again, back to your question, these two would be. A couple of I don't even want to say cherries on top of the sundae because they're much bigger than that in terms of in terms of just what they can do for the team and national perception of this class. These are guys that can bump the class in terms of ranking up into the top, up into above top 25, maybe top 20. But it also looks better because, again, people say, oh, wow, these kind of guys come in after a 6-7 season. What happens when Nebraska has 10 wins or maybe even 11? At what point do they get to be a college football playoff contender? When do we start talking about this?
And, Brandon, because of, the momentum Nebraska had going in to the offseason with that win against UCLA. What's been the biggest difference between Mike Riley and Bo Pelini's recruiting style? Mike Riley finally getting his feet wet. It's his full year of recruiting under Nebraska. What's been the biggest difference that you've noticed so far between Mike Riley and Bo Pelini?
Well, I think it has to be the enthusiasm. I see a lot of love for recruiting under Mike Riley. It seems like he really enjoys getting out and meeting these kids and having a lot of interaction with the kids and the families and the coaches of these kids at high school and even at the JUCO range. And it's not just Mike though. It's also it goes down into his assistants, and then that goes down into the support staff like we were talking about. When you have that sort of excitement at all levels, it breeds positivity. And it starts up top with Mike, and Mike is just a very, as we've, I think, all seen, a very likable guy. And he's just very mellow, very smooth. One thing that a lot of kids have said is, it's not all football 24/7. He comes in, he talks a little bit of football, but he talks about life. He wants to get to know you. He wants to understand if he can actually get you the best life experiences possible and make sure, these kids are in the prime of their lives. They're never getting them back. Wants to make sure that he can set you up to be, a man, going from, a young man to a man. And I don't know that Bo actually did that. I think he went out and wanted to see, okay, I need this player, this type of player, this type of player, this type of player. These are the holes I have. Now I need to fill them. And I don't know that he necessarily went out looking for. I don't know that he necessarily had the list in terms of what he's looking for in a player that Riley does. But the key here, and this is something I want to underscore, is that Riley is looked at as one of the best talent evaluators in college football by his peers. So Bo, especially as a first-time head coach, not going to be anywhere near that. Whereas Riley, this is old hat. This is something that he's been doing. So, it's like having Kasparov playing, me in chess. So I think that's the major the major difference there is just the amount of experience and knowing what it takes to take a team, from let's say that went 9-3 versus a team that went 6-7 and go on and having a good success, because Bo did have very well ranked classes, but at the same time the evaluation wasn't that great. About half of these classes ended up leaving Lincoln. So the question is going to be, and this is something we won't be able to see for a little bit, but how many kids from these classes are going to stick around? And I think from what we've heard, everybody said, no, Lincoln's my town. This is my second home. So we'll see how many of these kids stick around versus Pelini's.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brandon, let me ask you this. From your perspective, who's the most under-the-radar, hopefully, signee that's going to end up having a really good career at Nebraska?
That's a very good question. I've been thinking about it. I think it's interesting that you mentioned this because there's a lot of controversy over satellite camps. And Nebraska actually got a commitment because of their satellite camp. DiCaprio Boodle, if you recall his name, he is a cornerback. He's about 5'11", 175, out of Miami South Ridge, Miami, Florida. And he's it wasn't a name. He's a name. I mean, DiCaprio Boodle. That's a pretty good name. That's an all-name name. But no, he's a quality guy. I mean, he's not ranked all that highly. 24/7 has him as the 126th cornerback.
Yeah.
His state for Florida, he's 198. But at the same time, these guys had the opportunity to go down to Florida and to Miami, a very talent-rich area, of course, and they had the opportunity to basically run him through a camp. And they wouldn't have had that opportunity before. So I think this is a guy that they wouldn't have had the opportunity to see before. And they say, man, we've seen this guy. This is quality. And as a matter of fact, when he was in the camp itself, his was a name that came up on day one. So I think he's going to do well. He's been committed since July of early last year, and I think he'll do well.
There's been a lot of controversy lately about the tight end Chase Allen, who's supposed to announce his commitment today. Do you think there's a recruiting rivalry brewing between Mike Riley and Jim Harbaugh?
I think there's a little back and forth. I would say, well, it's funny you mentioned that because last year when the recruitment of Matt Snyder was going on, who, was choosing between Nebraska and Michigan, Mike Riley said I don't know if it was necessarily about this context, but he said something to the effect of recruiting against Harbaugh was quote-unquote fun, with a smile. So I think there's a little bit of a rivalry there. I think it's fun because obviously in the Pac-12 you had Oregon State going up against Stanford, and Harbaugh was not afraid of offering the same offering the same prospects that Riley did, because obviously Stanford was Stanford, Oregon State was Oregon State. We're seeing a lot of that for some reason with Todd Graham and Arizona State. Nebraska would offer a prospect. Arizona State would come in and offer a prospect. We saw that a lot this cycle, and I'm going to tell you, I watch for 2017, the class of 2017. Same thing's going to happen, although I'll tell you this much. Nebraska already jumped the gun, well, didn't necessarily jump the gun, but they got out ahead on this one and have offered a ton of guys in Arizona, so maybe a strike back at Graham there. But do I think something's happening with Harbaugh? Maybe, maybe not. But at the same time, these guys are going to go up against each other for the same quality athletes. In terms of Allen himself, I don't think he'll be going to Michigan because they just picked up another commitment. So right now I think it's between Nebraska and Iowa State. He's got a lot of family in the state of Iowa, so it wouldn't shock me to see him be a Cyclone.
Brandon, you talked about the recruiting battles that Nebraska faces against Arizona State, Michigan, and, in the state of Colorado, too, Nebraska's been able to recruit well out of that pipeline. Kenny Bell, Eric Lee, Avery Anderson, and now this year, both Jack Stoll, the tight end from Regis, and JoJo Doman, a guy who was, he won the MVP for the 4A division 2 years in a row. What effect are these guys going to have for the Nebraska Cornhuskers, and how are they going to help that pipeline to Colorado?
Well, I think, like you say, you want to keep that 500-mile radius that everybody talks about. That's very important, obviously. Delvin, I really liked when he came aboard. Just as we're looking at a linebacker here in Delvin. I like his speed. I like his physicality. Don't really know what all he has to offer, but that's why we have practices. And then in terms of Ben. If I understand correctly, actually looking to use him as, I think they're looking at trying him as a D end or a tight end, seeing what he can actually do the best at. I think they're going to try him out at D end, but don't necessarily quote me on that. But I think I think these guys are both quality individuals. I was happy with their commitments. Just overall, I think what they can do is I think they have quality talent. I defer to Mike Riley on this. We talked about his talent evaluation. I watched the tape. I liked what I saw. It wasn't like an oh my gosh, this is so great, but they were very impressive in terms of just basic mechanics, and they weren't necessarily doing anything wrong. They weren't doing things that made you say, "Oh wow!" in Division I in FBS or whatever we're calling it these days, college football, they're going to get torched. So I'm going to be interested to see there. I don't know if they're necessarily going to play on special teams or whatnot. That's going to be an interesting thing to see. But I think with some development, they'll be able to contribute, especially I would say, especially JoJo. But then I look at Ben and I say, no, both of these guys could contribute. Special teams, I think, is going to get a big emphasis again, much like it was under Tom Osborne. Tom Osborne, he really put an emphasis on on special teams. I think we're going to see that again. Under Bruce Reed, a lot of people are saying, well, he better earn his money. I think he's going to earn that paycheck, hopefully, with guys like JoJo Doman and Ben Steele, or Still, excuse me.
Now, Brandon, let me ask you, do you think there's anything lacking from this recruiting class? Is there something you wish Mike Riley would have went after that he didn't?
Well, it's not necessarily that he didn't go after guys. The one thing, or I guess a couple of things, depending on how you want to phrase it, is a couple of defensive tackles. There's obviously, we talked about a signing day surprise. I wouldn't mind a defensive tackle when we talked about, Valentine and Collins leaving for the NFL. D-tackle was it's a need, and it's also a target. Is it unfortunate that it doesn't look like Nebraska's going to wrap up a big name or even a solid name defensive tackle, even a JUCO? It's unfortunate, but it's not a killer. It's not something that's going to hinder this class or this team for the year. But that means they really have to hit it hard. Next class, probably taking as many as 4, maybe 5. One thing that I do know is that Mark Banker wants to have a hard 15 defensive tackles on his roster at all times, and right now I think they're about one shy of that. So wouldn't shock me to see maybe a walk-on get a scholarship, or see maybe an offensive lineman flip and try to work in there. But yeah, I think if a D-tackle or 2 would have been in this class as well, I think it would have almost been a perfect class. I don't necessarily say, I'd say perfect in terms of getting all the needs. But you'll likely see that next cycle. Just unfortunately it didn't work out. But there were a lot of needs like offensive tackle. This is one of the best offensive line classes that Nebraska has seen in I don't even know how long, and that's a credit to Coach Cavanaugh, no relation. Although great guy, don't get me wrong. I wish he was. But this is a fantastic offensive line class. Matt Farniok just committing a day or two ago, making this a fantastic class. So yeah, unfortunately, no defensive tackle that Riley can really hang his hat on. But again, I expect that to be addressed next class.
Brandon, you know as well as I do that a couple weeks ago in Husker Nation, it was like the sky is falling. This team's going to finish ranked in the 40s in recruiting. But then we got a late push. Then all these guys started committing. A couple recruits came in for the Michigan basketball game, committed a few days after that. Will we see this sort of late push every year from Mike Riley's staff?
I don't know that you'll necessarily see it every year. I mean, recruiting is, I always say, it's one of the most heart-wrenching gut punch. I mean, if you want to be a fan of it, you got to realize that you're getting in on a roller coaster of a hobby. I mean, you can't let what kids say on Twitter or Instagram or Snapchat or anything. You can't let social media run your life when it comes to this, or you will have an ulcer, you will need Tums, you will need everything you could possibly, you'll be chugging Pepto-Bismol. I think basically what happened was there was that lull, right? And then what happened was the staff lined up the visitors that they had, brought them in. The Michigan game really showed the kids that, you know what, even though there's no football going on, I think this was honestly one of the best visits. There is no football going on. It was snowing, and you had the Calabasas guys. He was their 4th and 5th visits. I think for Keyshawn Jacques Jr. was his 5th, and for Mornay Holmes it was his 4th. So you got these kids coming in, and they see a full PBA, and they are just absolutely giving it their all against Michigan. Obviously, ultimately lost, but to show that not only a town or a student body, but a state is behind them. You have a lot of guys there. I got a lot of guys that ended up committing, and I think a lot of guys that will end up committing out of that group that was there. When you can go in and you can sell, and this is another thing that I don't know that Bo could do as well as Mike Riley and his group can. When you can go in there and sell and close, especially, and say, okay, here's what we got. Here, we're setting things up perfectly. This is what we need from you. This is what, we can do for you. This is what you can do for us. I wouldn't necessarily expect that kind of a lull every single year, but you never know. Typically what happens is you'll have a number of commitments come out. I would expect between February and June or July there to be, a decent amount of commitments. And then you've got like senior year starting and stuff like that. So there's usually a little skip there. And then you've got college football season, which that can be kind of bumpy, and bowl season can kind of kill things because there's a dead period and stuff there. But right now, from about January till now, is where we usually see a rush. So this is nothing new. You'll see this every single year in terms of getting guys left and right if there's spots open. So if there's 7 spots, 5 spots, you'll see Nebraska and every other team for that matter trying to rush to make to get their cherries on top of the sundae, so to speak.
One last question for you. Do you think Nebraska has laid the foundation for the 2017 class by really recruiting Keyshawn Johnson and Darnay Holmes hard and getting them here and getting them on campus to see everything? We obviously have no commitments for the 2017 class, unlike last year when a couple people committed in the fall of 2014 to the 2016 class. But do you think they have laid the foundation for this 2017 class?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, when you look at for example, Markel Dismuke, he's from Calabasas. He committed this cycle. You look at Keyshawn Johnson Jr., already been here 5 times with his father. You look at Darnay Holmes, a 5-star recruit. He's been here 4 times. You look at Tristan Gebbia, who is the quarterback for Calabasas. He's been around, and Riley has really taken the shine. I honestly think, this is my personal opinion, don't take this as fact, but I think he might be the Pat O'Brien of next cycle. You've got a lot of Calabasas boys, and a lot of them are liking what Mike Riley is selling. Specifically, I think because you've got Keyshawn Johnson Sr. also saying, this is my boy. The relationship with Senior and Riley is I can't emphasize how big that is with this. Is it laying a foundation? Absolutely. And I think you'll see guys saying, wow, Keyshawn Johnson Jr. is going there. Wow, Tristan Gebbia, that Darnay Holmes, a 5-star, is going there. What is going on? And if Riley can turn things around and have a solid season, the schedule is looking to be a little difficult with like going to Wisconsin and playing Ohio State. And that Oregon game should be fun, though. I'll tell you that. That should be amazing. But the schedule overall, it works out to an opportunity far better than 6 and 7. I think when you get these guys in there, and especially the quality guys on here, who knows what could happen between Patrick O'Brien and Tommy Armstrong. I'm not going to talk about that today because I could talk about it for 20 minutes. You don't necessarily know who these offensive linemen, if anybody's going to start, any of the cornerbacks, the tight ends. Although I guarantee you, some of these guys are going to start. That's just something you can expect of a Mike Riley Mike Riley recruiting classes, that a good chunk of these people, they're going to get their opportunity to start. And especially these offensive linemen, there's big need for some quality offensive linemen, some quality defensive backs. So once these guys start, once these guys come in and play, and they show off their stuff and they show, okay, this is how we fit in the system. And then you get the Calabasas guys, if they end up committing, which apparently, you're stopping in 4 times or whatever, just kind of like Matt Farniak. He actually visited 9 times. I'm not exaggerating. 9 times including his official visit. You're going to see, I think you're going to see something special. We'll just put it that way.
Well, we'll see if all these recruits can make a significant impact in their first year. National Signing Day is all day Wednesday, February 3rd, and we'll see if Nebraska can land a couple more before everything wraps up. Brandon, thanks so much for coming on.
Absolutely, and hey, feel free to follow me on Twitter at 8Laces, folks. Thanks for having me on.
All right,
thank you.
From the highlight of the college football offseason to the highlight of the pro football season, we'll talk Super Bowl next. All that and the Jordan Stevenson tweet of the week coming up on the Spill Sports Show. Stay with us.
Bring 'em out, bring 'em out, bring 'em out, bring 'em out. It's hard to yell when the barrel's in your mouth. Come on.
You're listening to the Spill Sports Show on KRNU2.
Just got to do what I got to do and when I got to do it, So basically just doing what I got to do every time I step on the court and do what I got to do.
Now, live from Andersen Hall on the UNL campus, here's Matt Reynoldson, David Eickholt, and Scott Ayers.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Spill Sports Show on KRNU2. Next week, we'll have our full Super Bowl preview, but we couldn't go a full show without talking about the biggest story in the world of sports. So, guys, let's jump right into it. One of the bigger stories this week has been Cam Newton's image. He came out this week and said he thinks people might be scared of him as a black quarterback because they've never seen anyone like him before. Does Cam have a valid point?
You know what? I actually agree with Cam. I think there is still a lot of issues with people, because the traditional quarterback that some people think of is a white quarterback, pocket passer, throws for 4,000 yards a season, 30 touchdowns, whatever. Cam Newton's kind of breaking that barrier. Obviously, we've seen players like Steve McNair, Vince Young, and now Cam Newton, he's having just a fantastic season, MVP-like season, and, obviously his antics on and off the field, some people may dislike that, and there's also that card of race that can be drawn. You see some of the nasty things people can see on Twitter, and you just wonder, we're in 2016. Yeah, there's going to be black quarterbacks that are as fantastic as Russell Wilson, Cam Newton, and Jameis Winston. These guys are coming into the NFL. They're playing great, and people just have to get used to it. There's going to be black quarterbacks. That's just how it is, and they're fantastic quarterbacks at that.
And as far as I'm concerned, Vince Young's career ended after he scored a touchdown against USC. I don't like talking about his pro career. But you know what? I absolutely 100% agree with you, and I agree with Cam Newton. I'm trying to think of someone he reminds me of. Mike, you can't. He's a great passer, and what I think of when he runs, I think of a gazelle. He doesn't sprint. It's just gliding. He just glides through the defenses, very shifty, and he's just, I think, a new breed of quarterbacks that are about to enter the NFL. I'm not talking about in terms of race or anything like that, but in terms of play style, he and Russell Wilson are just on another level. And you saw Russell Wilson, how he ended the season. It was unbelievable. Historic numbers. But Cam Newton, he's 100% right. There's nothing that I can think of that people could even argue with. And he's so confident, and that's why he says this stuff. He knows, he's finally beginning to realize how good he is, and I think it's just good for him, and I think it's good for the NFL, quite frankly.
People often antagonize Cam Newton for being confident. They say he's cocky. They say he has a bad attitude. But just because somebody shows their personality on the field, dances around a little bit, does some touchdown dances. I had a conversation with a friend a couple weeks ago who's not a fan of Cam Newton, but when I compared it to the NBA, where it seems like everybody tends to taunt other players, he's like, well, that's just the NBA. The NFL players don't do that. And it just seems like he was looking for an excuse to dislike Cam Newton. Mm-hmm. You can say whatever you want about Auburn. You can say whatever you want about his dad possibly taking money that was never even proven. But if you don't like Cam Newton because he strikes you the wrong way because you say he's cocky, I think you need to get in the 21st century and loosen up your idea of sports a little bit, because sports are supposed to be fun, and that's why we all watch them. We all love sports because sports are a release. Sports are a vacation from everything else that's going on in the world. And if you can't have fun with sports, what can you have fun with?
Yeah, absolutely. And Cam Newton just kind of brings that X factor. He's fun to watch, and I've had the same conversations with people who dislike Cam because he's cocky or whatever, but he just brings a whole different type of energy to the NFL, and he makes defensive players angry because of his touchdown celebrations. But if he makes you so angry, don't let the guy score touchdowns on you. It's that simple for the defenses. Scheme around him, because if it's that tough to stop him, then you got to change something. And I think, obviously, this is kind of going off track, but the Denver Broncos will be making some sort of schemes to pressure him and to try to not allow him to find the end zone like he has against these other teams.
It's interesting. The more I think about it, the more I see to be true. Cam Newton is reminding me of when Richard Sherman was really coming in coming into the sports world, because he was always a good cornerback, but people didn't know him really until I'm the best corner in the game, and I went off like that. But Cam Newton is just doing it a different way, and I feel like as a society, this is going to your point, Matt, I feel like we're getting a little bit more soft, because if you really want to know how cocky or arrogant or how intense sports were, look up Magic Johnson versus Larry Bird. Go look up Bill Russell versus Wilt Chamberlain. Look up some of the old rivalries. Nowadays, we have nothing that can compare to them. Peyton and Brady, there's great competitors on the field, but they don't speak much outside. They don't force anything on the field. They respect each other. But now it's not like it was, and I think people are just trying to force it to relive that if they really understood the magnitude of what rivalries were and what sports were back then.
And something that really, talking about rivalries, leading up to that Broncos-New England game, they were spitting words back and forth. Derek Wolfe saying he doesn't like anything about New England. New England player Rob Gronkowski making some comments back against Denver. And that's some of the rivalries we like to see. You don't have to be friends with the people you're playing against. And that's a common trend we're seeing a lot now in all sports. And, yeah, it's nice to see that, but at the same time, I think people like to see those bitter rivalries when two teams clash. And I'm not talking about, players throwing fists at each other or anything, but playing tough, mean, gritty football, two teams that dislike each other but aren't, just having personal foul after personal foul.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's talk about Cam Newton in the Super Bowl, in the context of the Super Bowl. It's often a trend that MVP-winning quarterbacks end up playing poorly in the biggest game of them all. Is the curse real, David?
I don't think so. It's really hard to argue against some of the facts and some of the former MVPs and how they really perform. But it just goes back to what we just said. Cam Newton is a one-of-a-kind player, and now he's finally coming in. He's finally realizing how great he is. He's so confident. I cannot see him falling short, especially after the year he's had.
He has had a great season, but this is a whole different level against a whole different defense he has not faced yet this season. This is the number one defense in the NFL. And, the Denver Broncos have felt belittled. They have felt disrespected all season long. Cam Newton's really got to play a great football game, because this is a defense that's going to play angry, they're going to play mean, and they're going to get to Cam Newton like they did against Tom Brady.
Cam Newton is so confident in every game, and you're right, it's different when he's going against this caliber of a defense.
Absolutely.
He hasn't played on this big a stage since the 2011 national championship with Auburn, and he didn't perform particularly well on that stage. Do you think this time the big stage will get to Cam Newton?
I don't think so. I think I'm not saying he'll have a legendary game. It won't be one of the best performances we've ever seen. But he'll put up a good game, because, like I said, the reason why quarterbacks fall short in this stage is because they try sprinting around, and that's why dual-threat quarterbacks don't really work out in the NFL. It's because defenses are more athletic, they're faster, they're stronger, everything. But, again, Cam Newton glides. He doesn't sprint. It's just it's unparalleled, and it's something that we've never seen. But if the Panthers want to win this game, Cam Newton has to be a pocket passer, and his offensive line has to protect him, because I don't know how Cam Newton will get around the speed of a Von Miller, a DeMarcus Ware. I just don't see it.
Yeah, and he could have a great game, but I think he's going to have to rely on the Carolina defense, because Jonathan Stewart will not be able to run the ball against a Denver defense that, Steven Jackson did have a rushing touchdown, but he also only had 19 yards against this Denver defense. And that Carolina offensive line's really going to have to protect well, because Von Miller didn't get to play against Seattle. Chris Harris Jr. didn't get to play against Seattle. These are two guys that really have an impact on the defensive side for Denver. Carolina, it's not going to be Cam Newton's game. It's going to be Luke Kuechly and that Carolina defense. Can they force turnovers? Because if Denver has a sound game offensively, it's going to put a lot of pressure on Cam Newton, his first Super Bowl appearance.
Let's take a look at the other sideline. Peyton Manning has made a living off dump-off passes in these playoff games, in this season most of all, because it seems like he's losing a little bit of strength. This could be his last year, especially if he wins this game. I think he's done.
Yep.
What kind of throws does he need to make for the Broncos to stay in this game?
And, it starts with his deep ball passes. And believe it or not, a lot of his deep ball passes, they're not being underthrown, they're being overthrown to passes to Emmanuel Sanders. Obviously, there was one where Emmanuel Sanders made a great play, but he's just overthrowing them. And if he can hit a couple big passes early on in the game, it'll set the tide for the Denver Broncos. And not only that, can he find passes over the middle? Sometimes he not underthrows, but he's off the mark.
Yeah.
Can he be on the mark in those passes? Because Carolina's defense, almost as scary as Denver's, you know they're going to be rushing. They're going to be blitzing him. So can he get the ball quickly out of his hand and into the receivers?
And you hit the nail on the head. I think it all starts with the deep ball because you're not going to be doing dump-off passes and getting by a Luke Kuechly or any of the great Panthers. Because Panthers have a great defense. The dump-off passes are not going to work. Demaryius Thomas has to show up.
Yep.
The wide receivers have to show up. Peyton Manning has to hit the throws that we've seen so many times Peyton Manning hit. That's exactly what it's going to come down to. I think if they can complete 3 or more deep passes, I'll say deep as in 25, 30 yards, I'll count as deep.
Yeah.
I think the Broncos win. I think it's going to live and die by the deep ball because both defenses are going to show up. But it's who can break down the long ball and who can make the big plays. Because Broncos defensively will have to shut down Ted Ginn. I know, it's a joke, but tell you what, the man's fast, and he's had a lot of big plays.
Yeah, Ted Ginn Jr. is a quick receiver, but if you compare receiving cores, Denver has the edge.
Oh, absolutely.
Obviously, Greg Olsen is a phenomenal tight end, but you look past that, Ted Ginn Jr. has had drop problems. Demaryius Thomas as well, but you compare them head-to-head, Broncos have the edge receiver-wise. We're going to see what happens, though, come in a week, basically in a week and 2 days. It's going to be fun to watch.
And in 1 week from today, we'll have our full Super Bowl preview, a complete hour of Super Bowl preview featuring Connor Happer of 93.7 The Ticket coming on as our guest to talk about the game. Well, now it's time for everyone's favorite weekly segment featuring the Twitter philosopher himself, former Nebraska running back Jordan Stevenson.
Hello, Twitter bird.
Former Nebraska running back Jordan Stevenson tends to say some interesting, inspirational things.
It's just all about it, going in there with a great mindset and just knowing the plan, sticking to the plan. That's my favorite motto, sticking to the plan. Man, the sky's the limit. Anything's possible. He's the best quote out there, and his Twitter game isn't lacking. Tell me something now. Without further ado, here's the Jordan Stevenson Tweet of the Week.
This week, Jordan Stevenson tweeted, "People won't reel, but get mad when real see why they not real." Snoozing emoji. We now go to David 2 Chainz Eickholt for the translation.
All right, boys, let's start off with the basic. Won't should be want.
No, I think it's won't.
No,
I think he meant to say that.
No, here's the thing. In the hood, want still means want. It's not won't. So let's continue on. People won't reel, but get mad when real see why they not real. People want real, but they get mad when people are fake, and then they realize that person is not real. And I think that's a shot at Nebraska. I think that's just Jordan Stevenson taking former shots at his girlfriend they did have at Nebraska, and they had a falling out. I'm sorry to hear that, but he just wants people to be straight up and honest, just like he is with everyone else.
We now go to emoji expert Scott Ayers for the snoozing emoji.
And you know, guys, this comes right out of the famous philosopher Aristotle's playbook itself. You know, I just think this is one of the greatest things I have ever seen. Aristotle himself, known for his emojis, and now Jordan Stevenson says, Aristotle, I'm going to take it to the next level. That's what he was able to do on this tweet. The snoozing emoji, just really the exclamation point on saying why they ain't real. Great work, Stevenson.
You know, I really get my daily motivation from Jordan Stevenson's tweets, and, you know, I'm subscribed to his Twitter, and yesterday he went on a Kevin Gates tweet spree, and it was inspirational, man.
Absolutely. If you want to start your day off right, forget the cup of coffee. Go read Jordan Stevenson's Twitter. That's what gets me going every morning, boys.
Absolutely.
And some good Aristotle.
Well, up next is the second hour of the Spill Sports Show. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
The Spill Sports Show with Matt Reynoldson, David Eickholt, and Scott Ayers. Never miss a show again. Check out our podcast at thespillkrnu.wordpress.com.
The 76ers could have drastically improved their organization by drafting Walter Pitchford.
Quite frankly, if he wins the Super Bowl, I'll direct it 30 for 30 on it.
I've watched this kid play multiple times on national television.
You like watching kids, David?
Dude, I love basketball. Excuse me.
The Spill Sports Show, every Friday from 1 to 3 on KRNU2.
Bring 'em out, bring 'em out, bring 'em out, bring 'em out. It's hard to yell when the barrel's in your mouth. Come on.
You're listening to the Spill Sports Show on KRNU2.
Just gotta do what I gotta do, and when I gotta do it, you know. So basically, just doing what I gotta do every time I step on the court and do what I gotta do.
Now, live from Andersen Hall on the UNL campus, here's Matt Reynoldson, David Eickholt, and Scott Ayers.
Woman and child did that. Put them in the aisles. Johnny the Jet Rogers just tore them loose from their shoes.
You believe in miracles? Yes!
Comes to LeBron. He takes a fadeaway for the win. He knocked it down!
Here goes Davis. Oh, my God! Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
You can't believe what just happened! What a time to be alive!
Hit me with the horn, 20. Keep making noise! Yeah! Here we go now! 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 Check it out!
Welcome back. You're listening to the second hour of the Spill Sports Show. Matt Reynoldson, David Eickholt, and Scott Ayers with you. We are live from Andersen Hall on the UNL campus, and we are talking about people that play games for money. But there are some people that play games for an education, like our beloved Nebraska basketball team. They're heading to West Lafayette tomorrow to face a stacked Purdue team. Guys, what sticks out to you about this game?
I think the first thing you got to look at is Purdue's bigs versus Nebraska's quote-unquote bigs, because Nebraska's bigs are not big compared to these. You know, they got the three-headed monster, Purdue, with A.J. Hammonds, Isaac Hawes, and great phenom freshman Caleb Swanigan. It's going to be a really, really tough game, I think, for us to defend the post, because Isaac Hawes is 7'2", 297 pounds, and he is just a tank. And then you have A.J. Hammonds, who has led the Big Ten in blocks the last 3 seasons, and he's going to be an NBA prospect. And it's just going to be really tough, and I'm really excited to see how Raphael Davis and Andrew White go up against each other, because Nebraska fans, if you don't know who Raphael Davis is, you're going to learn by the end of the game, because he is notorious for, he's kind of an Aaron Kraft type specimen.
I hate Aaron Kraft.
A lot of hand checking, a lot of grabbing, and no calls, so you're not going to like him. But I think those are the big matchups from what I see, but I'll tell you what, it's going to be a really, really tough game for Nebraska.
Yeah, Hammond, Morrow, Shields, and Jacobson are all going to have to step up for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. I didn't think Siobhan Shields had a particular good game against the Michigan Wolverines. I think that he's really going to want to have to step up against this Purdue Boilermaker game. And, you know, this is not an easy matchup for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. This is the toughest part of their schedule, to play Michigan State, Michigan, Maryland, all within the span of a couple of weeks. This is tough, but this is what really proves the pretenders from the contenders. If Nebraska can just get another big win against one of these two teams in Purdue or Maryland, I think that'll speak volumes of 10 miles in this Nebraska Cornhusker team.
You know, I've heard a lot of people talk about how bad of a matchup Purdue is for Nebraska. But when you think about it, Purdue's a bad matchup for everybody in the Big Ten. Nobody has the amount and depth of bigs that Purdue does. Yet a team like Illinois with no noticeable bigs beat them at home. And there's Iowa doesn't necessarily match up as far as bigs to Purdue, yet took them down. Purdue can lose games. They're still the same Purdue team that they were last year, perhaps, because they don't have the consistent guard play to supplement their bigs. The forwards and centers, they don't have the offensive prowess that lets them really dominate games the way they should as far as size matchups go. And so I think Nebraska could really, really take advantage of this game by using a guard like Ty Webster or Siobhan Shields to really slash into the middle and create those mismatches, get the bigs out of there, and get some layups.
And the thing that I've noticed between all of Purdue's losses, here's the thing. How you overcome Purdue's size is your team's skill. It's not about depth. It's about having great outside shooting, working inside out, create the fouls, get them in foul trouble. Because A.J. Hammond is known, he can foul out in a lot of games and has a lot of fouls. But you beat him with skill. You need to take them out of the game. But let me say this. Expect Isaac Hawes and A.J. Hammonds to try and take over. But with Purdue, what they've had a big problem with is getting the ball to them. For as good as they are, they don't get enough touches. So limit the touches of inside guys and have great outside shooting, hopefully led by Andrew White. If he can come back and have a good bounce-back game, then I think, we have a good shot.
And, outside shooting will be key. Andrew White III, Jack McVeigh. Ty Webster actually has improved his three-point shooting. But, it just comes to playing good, strong defense. Yeah, the bigs are going to get their points. That's a given. But can Nebraska stop the guard play of the Purdue Boilermakers? If they're able to do that, if, Ty Webster and Glenn Watson Jr., a guy who, big prospect coming in, hasn't had many great games yet for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. If they can outplay the guards of Purdue, I think Nebraska has a good chance of winning this basketball game.
The key is to make it a shootout. Because if you look at the game against Iowa, the three bigs combined for 16 points, and Iowa center had 13. That was only 1 versus 3. Get outscored by 3 doing that. That's not bad. Give them, they are not known for hitting a lot of outside shots. So the key is just get in a shootout with them. And if Nebraska is even relatively on, you might be able to pull an upset. But I'll tell you what, Mackey Arena is not an easy place to go in and win. No matter how bad Purdue is or how good they are. It's still a really, really good Big Ten venue. And it's tough to get away from there with a win.
Speaking of needing a strong shooting performance, Andrew White has been, I wouldn't say dormant, but a little bit off of his shooting strength. The last couple games, scored only 7 points against Michigan, missed a lot of shots, scored only 7 points against Michigan State, missed a lot of shots here at home against Michigan. Does Andrew White need a big bounce-back game?
Maybe not a big game, but he does need a nice bounce-back game, and it starts with his inside scoring. That will give him more confidence when he's shooting outside. So if he can just start hitting those 10-foot jumpers and then eventually work his way out into shooting those outside three-pointers that we've been accustomed to see him make, that he's been struggling the last 2 games, I think that'll be huge for the Nebraska Cornhuskers and for Andrew White III.
The key is for him to get off to a hot start. Because if you're a player and you see the ball go through your first 1 or 2 shot attempts, you are good for the rest of the game. That is exactly how you build confidence. And I think the Nebraska Cornhuskers, they need to create open looks for him. Let him run baseline to baseline. Get some double screen action going in there. Let him run around the top. Get an open shot top the key if they can have enough screens and ball movement to do that. I think you need to start off the game, run 2 or 3 plays through him, at least get him going so he can have the confidence that, okay, I can get my shot off. If 1 or 2 of them go in, even better, because then he's going to be actively looking for a shot, even if the play is not running through him. He'll look for some isolation, go inside, create some fouls, and hopefully get some bigs out in foul trouble.
I think it's absolutely key that the entire team focuses on what they need to do as far as shooting the ball in this game. They obviously want to get inside. They obviously want to get the easy baskets, but you got to get Jack McVeigh, guys like Ty Webster, free for shots. Glenn Watson's been shooting the ball fantastic lately. He has that confidence to shoot it now. We know he has that confidence now. Get him those shots. But they didn't have those shots the whole game against Michigan. Well, they had it for spurts, and then they went on those dry spells. It was a tough defensive game. They kept in it offensively, made that great comeback, shaving an 18-point lead to 2. But let me ask you this about the bigger picture of the Michigan game. Was that loss simply the result of a great game by Michigan, or are there major issues to take away from that game?
I think it just proves that we still have a long way to go as a team. Grant, Michigan is Michigan's a legit Big Ten team. Even without Karis LeVert, they're still extremely talented, and they shoot the ball extremely well, and they are big three-point shooters. I think that game just kind of reopened our eyes in terms of, okay, we still go through some scoring droughts. I feel like here's the problem I see with this team. When they get in scoring droughts, everyone wants to be the hero. I see them doing way too much isolation instead of running their offense. I know guys like Siobhan Shields, Glenn Watson, and Andrew White, they all want to break the drought, but just run plays and run your offense and you will get open looks. Just don't try to go in 1-on-3 or anything like that. So I think it's just going to take us back down a level. We're going to evaluate what we need to fix, and I think we're going to do that. And I just hope for a strong performance against Purdue to get this team back on track to where it needs to be to hopefully get an NCAA bid.
The scoring drought. The scoring droughts are often, with the exception of the Michigan State game, the scoring droughts are often highlighted by Nebraska's offense trying to isolate Siobhan Shields and trying to run the entire offense through Siobhan Shields, which if he's off of his game, if he's forcing, it doesn't really work because he won't shoot the ball from the outside even if they're giving him 2 to 3 feet. But when he's slashing and he's not feeling that balance that he needs to feel there, obviously a great player, but he can't break a drought by himself. And I think a lot of times, because of occasions of previous success of him breaking the scoring droughts with his drives and quick scoring ability, I think he tries to force himself to do that, and I think Miles tries to force the offense through him a lot.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Matt. And you know what? Siobhan Shields is a great number 2, number 3 scoring threat, but I don't believe he's a consistent number 1 scoring threat. Siobhan Shields was on fire against Michigan State. He deserved to be the number 1 scoring threat that game, but he has never proven himself to be the number 1 scoring guy, and we've seen in a lot of their scoring drought games, which they have lost in, they try too hard to run the offense through Siobhan Shields. This is a team that needs to be more balanced offensively. Let guys like Glenn Watson get more looks, because when you just run through Siobhan Shields and he's struggling, that's when the losses begin to pile up.
And that's why I was really concerned after Siobhan Shields did go off in that Michigan State game. It's because now he's got the confidence, okay, I can be the number 1 guy. And I thought he was going to go take way too much isolation coming into the next game. But another issue I think that we haven't really mentioned yet, Derek Walton had 12 rebounds. He is 6 feet tall, and that just proves that our guards need to focus more on boxing out instead of getting lackadaisical, looking at the ball, and then running down court once they know we have the ball. They need to box out, and they need to be aggressive on the boards, because what we want for Michigan was their three-point shooting and the guards rebounding.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think Nebraska needs to be more keen against Purdue in crashing the defensive glass, because they're going to need all 5 guys on that court to box out and try to get the rebound. You can't really run transition when Purdue or Michigan's getting tons of offensive rebounds. It really kills momentum. Nebraska has to play quality defense for the 30 seconds on that shot clock and then box out, because when you box out and get the rebound, that's when you've won defensively.
Another big thing is, if you look at the stats, I think our 4 and our bigs need to improve on their perimeter defense, because I told you the X factor was going to be Duncan Robinson. Duncan Robinson had 21 points and 3 threes. And I'll tell you what, I was surprised he missed the 4 threes he shot, because they weren't really well contested. And if they were, it was by 6'2", 6'3" guys. Duncan Robinson's a 6'9" guy that can shoot from 3. So I think it's kind of funny that the guards need to work on rebounding and the big guys need to work on perimeter defense. It's just one of those things. But
is this game a must-win for Nebraska?
I'm not ready to go that far, because Purdue has been on a little bit of a downward spiral, but they're still a really, really good, talented team who could end up making a Sweet 16 run, possibly Elite 8 with the right matchups because of size. But and the next game, Maryland, I don't think if we can get away with 1 win, I think that's fantastic. We are back on track. But I'll tell you what, if we just fight the next 2 games and not get blown out, I like us going forward.
Yeah, this is an 18-4 Purdue team with a lot of talent. I don't know if you can go to the extent of a must-win. I think that Michigan game had a lot more significance because Nebraska and Michigan, both unranked, both really wanted to fight for, getting in those bubble spots. Obviously, Michigan probably going to make the tournament. But Nebraska, they've got games, Purdue and Maryland, and then Rutgers, Wisconsin, Penn State, Indiana. They're to lose against Purdue and Maryland. You've got to win out the rest of your schedule because it'll be tough to, impress the committee to get a bid in the tournament if you can't win against top quality opponents.
Oh, exactly. And you need that marquee win. You have that marquee win at Michigan State, but you need another one. Nebraska back in 2014 had that win at Michigan State and that great home win against Wisconsin. If they win one of these next two games, I think they're in really good shape. If they win both of these next two games, they're golden. This team needs that sort of boost in morale. And I'm going to disagree with you on the Michigan game. I think that wasn't as significant as a lot of people are playing it up to be because as far as resume, just considering the resume, that's not a resume-boosting win, and it's not really a resume-killing loss. As far as win-loss record, yeah, it's important. Yeah, it's huge. Michigan's a very middle-of-the-road tournament team. It's not a marquee win. It's not one of your biggest wins that you can hang your hat on. And it's not a bad loss that they came in here and won with that great shooting effort. And so I think if Nebraska wins one of these next two games, they're in good shape, and I think they need to beat the teams they're supposed to beat. They need to get over the Penn State hump that's been bothering them the last couple years. Yeah. They need to just take care of business at home against Rutgers. If they can pull off either a road upset at Purdue, which would be great for the resume, or a home upset against Maryland, which I personally believe will happen, that could be huge for this team's resume.
No, I agree, but I just don't know, man. I'm not sold that we can beat Maryland. I'm not. Melo Trimble, Diamond Stone both struggled last night, and they still got away with a good 6-point win over a top 10 team in Iowa. But I'm not ready to say must win, but I feel like the Michigan game was of significance because that was against one of the teams that we definitely could beat. And I'll disagree. I think they are a quality tournament team because when it comes down to in March is good coaching and great guard play. And I think that Michigan has both. I mean, I could pick Michigan as a dark horse for the Sweet 16 this year.
And, the only reason why I said that, too, is because Nebraska's resume is not looking that great. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they've got that Michigan State win, but they also had that loss to Samford, a team really, an 11-point loss to team really no one was talking about, and a 9-point loss at home against Northwestern. Those are two games that Nebraska would really like to have back and replay because that looks very ugly right now on the resume. So, Purdue, Maryland, huge games, but, if they don't win those, they really have to play well. They got to beat Penn State both times. They have to beat Rutgers. And, even a win against Indiana would be huge.
Yeah, when it comes down to it, we just got to beat the teams we're supposed to beat. And like you just named all the teams that we should win. We should go, I think you said 5 games. I think we need to go 5-0 in those games in order for us. I think if we finish above 500 in conference, we are in good shape going into the Big Ten tournament. Good showing there. Possibly a bubble team going into March.
Yeah. Nebraska tips off against Purdue at 3:30 tomorrow afternoon. Well, from a basketball town in Lincoln to a basketball nation in America, we'll take a look around the nation. Coming up next, this is the Spill Sports Show. Stay with us.
Back to the Spill Sports Show on KRNU2. Don't forget to check out our podcast on thespillkrnu.wordpress.com in the hours following the show.
That's like re-releasing a Tupac album and giving him a Grammy.
Now, live from Andersen Hall on the UNL campus, here's Matt Reynoldson, David Eickholt, and Scott Ayers.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Spill Sports Show on KRNU2. This weekend figures to be a great weekend of games, especially the Big 12 SEC Challenge in college basketball. Guys, which games stick out to you this weekend? We'll start with you, David.
I'll tell you what, the first thing that sticks out to me is you got Iowa State traveling to Texas A&M. I mean, Iowa State is, I'll tell you what, they've beaten 4 out of the 5 current top 5 teams in the nation, but they are missing a great signature road win. And Texas A&M, they already did lose this week, so they're looking to bounce back. But I expect Georges Niang and I think the nation's hottest point guard right now, Monte Morris, to come out with a vengeance. Because if they win this game, I'd propel them to a mid-2 seed, and they are looking at a 1 seed.
Yeah, I was going to mention this Iowa State-Texas A&M game, too. Texas A&M already losing to Arkansas this week, and I don't think A&M deserves to be a top 5 team right now, and a loss to Arkansas just kind of reiterates that statement. They did beat LSU by 14, but I'm just not overall impressed by this A&M team, and I think, in all honesty, Iowa State's going to dominate this game, and they're going to prove that they are a worthy team. Iowa State already have some big wins. Like you said, Oklahoma, Kansas, Colorado, Cincinnati. Those are just to name a few. I think this game's going to be a blow. And then obviously there's Kentucky against Kansas. That should be a great coaching matchup.
Absolutely, and I'll actually be traveling down and going to see that game, so I'm super excited about that. But I'll tell you what, I think Kentucky needs this more than Kansas right now, because Kentucky needs this to get back on the right track, because Kentucky is still one of the most talented rosters in the country. But Scala Bierce has been an absolute disappointment. And he has had a couple decent games to get back. But Jamal Murray, Tyler Eulis versus Selden, I'm just excited to see the guard matchup in this one.
I'm excited to see Scala Bierce try to take on Perry Ellis and those really experienced Kansas players. I'm still of the opinion that Kansas is by far the deepest team in the country. I'm still thinking Kansas is the best team in the country, even though North Carolina looks absolutely great right now. North Carolina hasn't played anybody in a while, but they're on, I think it's a 12-game win streak now. Maybe?
They did edge out. I'll tell you, I really thought they were going to lose against Virginia Tech. That was not their best performance of the year for sure.
Virginia Tech has been a trap destination this year, but Kansas is an interesting scenario, because does Bill Self outcoach Calipari in this game? Do you think that Kansas can really use their depth to take out a Kentucky team that's admittedly getting better? They'll finish wherever they finish in the regular season. This team will be a force to be reckoned with when tournament time comes around. And there's nothing that motivates a Kentucky team like stepping out of conference for a game, out of the lull of the SEC, which is not a good conference this year, out of the lull of the SEC, to go to a place like Fog Allen Fieldhouse in Lawrence, Kansas, to play another marquee program, could be just the motivation Kentucky needs to pull this off.
And this is a game, experience versus inexperience, and Kansas definitely has that X factor. And, I think Kansas is tired of hearing Kentucky being the super powerhouse that every team is feared of. Kansas won't back down, and neither will Kentucky by any means, but yeah, like you guys said, this is a bigger game for Kentucky than it is Kansas, because Kentucky really hasn't proven themselves this year. They're 19th in the country, but no one has been just in awe of a Calipari coach team. They haven't impressed anyone. If they can beat Kansas, they're going to be back on the radar.
Bill Self is Allen Fieldhouse is 209 losses. He's outstanding there. I think the crowd's going to be unreal. There have been people camping out since 4 a.m. Wednesday morning. They want this game. College game day is going to be there. I see Kansas coming out, and honestly, I have Kansas by double digits, I think, in this game.
Me too.
Let's look at a very under-the-radar matchup between two of the best players in the country. Buddy Hield against Ben Simmons. Oklahoma visits LSU at 5 Eastern Saturday. What are you looking for in this game?
Honestly, it's a matchup between two great players in all of college basketball, but LSU 13-7 right now on the season. They're third in the SEC, and guys, in all honesty, I think LSU is going to get blown out by Oklahoma. I know there's that X factor at home, but I just have not been impressed with this LSU basketball team. Losing double digits to Texas A&M, losing to a Florida team that really hasn't proven themselves this year. This is an LSU team who has played well, but they've also lost to teams like Wake Forest at home and losing at Houston. I have not been impressed with this LSU team. I think Oklahoma, they're going to prove that they deserve to be number one, and they're going to take care of business at LSU.
LSU lost to the College of Charleston by 12 in the non-conference season. But I'll tell you what, here's what's going to happen. It's going to be a blowout. Buddy Hield's going to go for over 30 points. Ben Simmons is going to have an outstanding individual game. But ultimately, I think Oklahoma wins by 20. It's why it's a must-watch TV is if you have not watched Ben Simmons play, he is the real deal. He is a big deal, and he will easily, I repeat, easily be the number one overall draft choice in this upcoming draft.
interesting thing about the next matchup we're going to talk about, West Virginia at Florida. Florida is at 13-7 right now. Their one noteworthy win coming against St. Joseph's, and the Gators have a top 30 RPI, top 10 strength of schedule, and a projected single-digit tournament seed. Do they have enough to beat West Virginia at home?
Here's the thing. Florida, the reason why they're still up there in RPI and strength of schedule, look at some of these losses. When Michigan State was number 1, they were at Michigan State, they lost by 6. At Texas A&M, lost by 3. And their last game at Vanderbilt, they lost by 1. This is a team that can hang around with the talented teams, but they just cannot finish many games. Right now, I have no problem with them being a single-digit seed. And right now, by the ESPN Power Index, they're 49% chance to win the game. Honestly, I think I'm going to pick Florida for this upset. I really think they have enough in them. West Virginia turns the ball over too much, and West Virginia has just not impressed me the last couple games they've played.
And, I don't think Florida deserves to be a single-digit seed. I think that's ridiculous that the fact that they are 5-3 in the SEC, they've lost to Florida State's not in the SEC, but they have lost to Tennessee, Texas A&M, Vanderbilt. Those are just to name a few teams. Vanderbilt behind them. Tennessee is 3-5 in the SEC. Yeah, they have a good RPI. They have quality losses, but notice how they don't have quality wins. Maybe Oklahoma State being their most quality win, a 2-point victory, or LSU. That's it. West Virginia, on the other hand, they have quality wins. They beat number 1 Kansas by double digits. They beat Kansas State on the road, beat Oklahoma State, who also has a big win. I think West Virginia has more quality wins, and they are a more quality team. I think this game will go down the wire, but I've got West Virginia winning.
I mean, yeah, I got Florida, and I'm not saying West Virginia is not a quality team, because they have a great resume, but only scored 49 against Texas. Grant, Texas is a dark horse for a tournament. If you have not watched them play, they are going to wreak havoc come March. But I think Florida's due for a big win. They always give teams a tough outing. I like Florida by 4.
Should be a great showcase of basketball this weekend. The Big 12 SEC Challenge, along with a bunch of other games around the country that do draw quite a bit of interest. Coming up next, we'll talk about all-star snubs and all things NBA. Stay with us. This is the Spill Sports Show. Welcome back into the Spill Sports Show on KRNU2. Matt Reynoldson, David Eickholt, and Scott Ayers with you. Guys, all-star rosters were released this week for the NBA. David, I know you're a big NBA guy. What's your take on those rosters?
I'm okay with most of it. Again, Kobe Bryant shouldn't be starting, but let me get to the snub. The biggest snub this year for me was Pau Gasol. It is absurd that Pau Gasol is not starting. He's 17 points a game, 2 blocks, 3 assists, nearly 11 rebounds a game. And there are games where he has put the Bulls on his 35-year-old back and just been carrying them. I can't believe he hasn't thrown out his back a couple times. It's absurd that he's not on the roster. And then you look at some of the stars they got, and it just doesn't really add up to me.
Yeah, and that's the problem with the voting system for NBA All-Star Weekend. Yeah, it's the fans' weekend, but All-Stars should be the best players in both conferences, and sometimes they get it right. But I remember when Kevin Durant was out for basically the entire first half of the season, he was voted into the All-Star game. And yeah, you know what? He is a great player. But if you aren't playing this season, you don't deserve to be in the All-Star game. Kobe Bryant, I get it. It's his last stand. It's his final goodbye. And yeah, put him maybe in the reserves, but he is not deserving of that starting spot in the All-Star game. It's just atrocious. It makes me annoyed. It's voting in the All-Stars, or not the All-Stars, but the superstars, whether or not they're having a great season. Mm-hmm. Kobe Bryant, I'm looking at his points per game. He's not even top 10 in the NBA for shooting guards points per game, and he's the number 1 voted player in the All-Star game this season.
It's all about the legacy. Let's talk about this. It's a major discussion over all sports. Is the NBA the best All-Star game in sports?
I think in terms of entertainment value, absolutely. I mean, there's no defense, but you're not there to see defensive plays. You're there to see the outstanding alley-oops. You're there to see the great shots. You're there to see the great passes. I mean, these players still will deliver. I'm expecting Kobe Bryant to do something out of his mind that he hasn't been able to do during the regular season.
Honestly, All-Star Weekend for the NBA is by far the best weekend for All-Star games. And, guys, believe it or not, my second All-Star Weekend, it's the MLS. You want to know why? You get the superstars of the MLS, and you play a top European soccer team. That's fun to watch. NFL, it's boring now. Players are declining to play in the All-Star game. Eli Manning went number 2 in the All-Star game for the NFL. Oh, my goodness. Eli Manning. Ugh. NBA weekend. Love the dunk contest. Love all the three-point contests and the actual game itself. It's just fun, and watching Kevin Hart trying to play basketball is just probably one of the more exciting things I've seen in recent history.
You know, it's fun. The NBA doesn't have to work so hard to get interest in their All-Star weekend. I really like what hockey did when they changed the All-Star weekend to hockey overtime rules, which is 3-on-3, just all out, brawling, good old-fashioned hit-him-against-the-wall hockey. But the NBA has really set the standard for All-Star games. It's you go to see fantastic athletes do what they do best. I wish more stars were in the dunk contest. Obviously, everybody does. But the NBA All-Star Weekend is unparalleled because they can show off and they can do whatever, and they don't have to try very hard to look amazing. And that's probably the most fun part, because the NBA All-Star Game doesn't have as much significance as, say, the MLB All-Star Game does, which determines home field in the World Series.
Right.
But the NBA All-Star Game is the spectacle that everybody wants it to be. It gets the best viewer ratings of any of the All-Star games, and people tune in almost as much for the fashion show of the players than as they do the actual game. And the game is always entertaining, always in the mid-100s, and it's just because the scoring prowess of these guys can just make you shake your head, step back, and just say, wow, this is fun to watch, even if nobody's playing defense, even if nobody really cares. It's fun to watch them fly around, make shots, and do crazy basketball things.
Boys, I just ordered a new calculator, and I'm going to send it to the NBA front office because what they are doing just doesn't add up. Damian Lillard is not in the All-Star game again. Damian Lillard, 24 points a game, 7 assists, 5.5 rebounds, and he has been carrying this Trailblazers team after they lost 8 of their top 9 players in the offseason. Damian Lillard, I'm sorry you got snubbed again. You're a great player. James Harden honestly should not be in over Damian Lillard.
James Harden has played some amazing basketball lately. Since the beginning of the season, he has just been lights out as far as a scorer. But I honestly don't know who I would put Damian Lillard in there instead of, but I agree Damian Lillard does deserve to be an all-star. He and C.J. McCollum are carrying that team, and it's mostly Damian Lillard. He's been a great player for some time now. Connection to Nebraska, his personal coach was Nebraska current assistant coach Phil Beckner.
Hey.
But Damian Lillard is a all point guard, and he deserves to be up there in consideration with the best of the West. And he would certainly be an all-star in the East over someone like possibly over one of the 5 to 7 to 10 Atlanta Hawks that are on the All-Star roster.
And, Damian Lillard, James Harden didn't take Damian Lillard's spot. James Harden has 27 points per game. The man who took Damian Lillard's spot is Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant is not having an all-star-like season. The reason why Kobe Bryant's in this game is because it's his final season. If Damian Lillard wants to be mad at anyone, it's Kobe Bryant. But you can't be mad at Kobe Bryant because it's his final season. Damian Lillard will get plenty of all-star game appearances. He just has to wait his time because having Chris Paul, Steph Curry, Russell Westbrook all ahead of you,
it's tough competition.
It's tough competition. He'll make the all-star game, I bet, next year. I'm not too worried about him. You just got to let Kobe Bryant go into the distance.
I said Damian Lillard should have made it last year. I said, the next year will be his year, and I really don't want to say it again. James Harden, if you've watched him, he still takes quarters off defensively. The guy's shooting 34% from 3. He's not the quote-unquote MVP caliber player that he was last year, he shouldn't have even been second voting, but that's a different story. But Damian Lillard, for what he means to that Trailblazers team and for what he's done in terms of carrying that team, the guy has to be rewarded. So that's why I'd put him in over James Harden. I respect Kobe Bryant too much to even want to try to start beef with him.
Oh, imagine when Dirk's last season is. Everybody will vote him to the All-Star game. He 7th all-time in scoring. I think he just passed Shaq, according to Mavs Radio's Chuck Cooperstein, who has joined us for a few interviews. Great guy. Shout out to Chuck if you're listening today. But let's talk about how much the difference of the perception of Kobe is. When he announced that this was his last season, everybody's like, we're all over Kobe now. We all want Kobe in the All-Star game. We're all going to revere and cheer the man we booed for so many years because we hated Kobe for a long time. But now, he's retiring.
We love him.
Revere him. He's great. Fantastic. It's going to be the same thing when LeBron retires.
I was about to say.
All the people that hate LeBron, I think there's a lot less reason to dislike LeBron than there is to like Kobe. To dislike Kobe. Shut up, David. I think there's a lot less reason to dislike LeBron than there is to dislike Kobe, especially because Kobe's just like the hard-nosed, just
killer.
Doesn't put up with anything type of attitude, and he's kind of been all about Kobe for a while, or more so all about winning instead of making friends. There was a quote one time from Kobe that said, "You don't need friends if you got championship banners," or something to that effect. But it's going to be the same thing when LeBron retires, and all of his haters are just going to revere him because it's his last season, and I guess that's what you do in the NBA. David, what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, I may get a lot of flack for my constant criticism of LeBron and Steph or whatever, but I absolutely think that LeBron should go out the same way that Kobe Bryant's going out. Because LeBron is a positive role model. He's a great guy.
Great off the court.
Great off the court. He's the poster child of a great role model for kids to look up to and to escape their troubled areas or troubled lives and improve themselves and strive to be like someone. So I hope LeBron gets that same kind of exit that Kobe Bryant's getting, and I think it will become a constant trend, and I don't see anything wrong with it. I think you should honor the greats. I hope Dirk gets the same effect. It's good for the NBA, it's good for sports, and it's nice to have some positive light on, the greats retiring.
And yeah, you see it in all sports. When Derek Jeter announced he would retire before going into his final season, he was just applauded and loved. Even the Boston Red Sox, one of the most hated rivals ever in the history of sports, gave him stuff, gave him like statues and all that. In his final at bat, he got a round of applause, a standing ovation, and that's what you want to see in sports. You have to understand and respect greatness.
He was a great guy too, though, off the field, obviously. But I'll tell you what, one person that's not getting it, Tom Brady. There's no way Brady's going to be getting the standing ovations and all that stuff. I'd say if Peyton Manning made it known, if he came back next season and he said, okay, this is my final year, I think Peyton Manning would absolutely. But Tom Brady, I don't care what he does. He's had too much controversy over the years. Tom Brady, just no chance, bud.
I don't know. This is probably just me, but I think Brady will get a warmer reception than many might think. Coming up next, sports reality TV series like HBO's Hard Knocks have been a huge hit. In the pop culture spill, we'll discuss what we would do if we were tasked to make our own reality TV show with an unlimited budget. That's after the break. This is the Spill Sports Show.
Bring 'em out, bring 'em out, bring 'em out, bring 'em out. It's hard to yell when the barrel's in your mouth. Come on.
You're listening to the Spill Sports Show on KRNU2.
Just gotta do what I gotta do, and when I gotta do it, So basically, just doing what I gotta do every time I step on the court to do what I gotta do.
Now, live from Andersen Hall on the UNL campus, here's Matt Reynoldson, David Eickholt, and Scott Ayers.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Spill Sports Show on KRNU2. Matt Reynoldson, David Eickholt, Scott Ayers with you. This is our weekly non-sports segment, The Pop Culture Spill. Today, we're talking about reality TV. Okay, guys, here's the scenario. You've been tasked by a major network to create the best reality show on television with an unlimited budget. David, what's your show?
I'll tell you what, I love to bring back a Jersey Shore type feel, have Jersey Shore combined with the Celebrity Apprentice, and have Mike, the Situation Sorrentino, run the New England Patriots. Have Sammy Sweetheart run the Golden State Warriors. I love to see just these outstanding role models and with great lifestyles that we all strive for and big difference makers in the community run a sports organization or another huge business. I think that would just be absolutely entertaining. So that's what I'd be doing.
Chains, I think that's great, but there was a childhood hero that unfortunately went into drug problems, who suffered greatly, who went through a lot, and I'd really love to do a reality TV show on Air Bud. He had it all. He won sports games. He was a great basketball player, great football wide receiver. But then he hit the hard life, drug problems, cocaine, methamphetamine, and now he's getting his own reality TV show, Air Buddy, coming at you soon.
Hard to top that, but I will. Celebrity baby races. That's the only thing I have to say about that. Look, David Beckham's kid, Brad Pitt's kid, facing off against
Snooki's kid.
Snooki's kid. Yeah,
Yeesh.
sure. I mean, I feel like she might be lagging behind just a little bit, but I want to see the babies of the most athletic people on the earth, Derek Jeter's kid, Peyton Manning's kid. I want to see those kids as babies racing. Riley Curry going up against Derrick Rose's kid. This is going to be the best.
Oh, man.
This is going to be the best television there is because it's baby races and they're celebrity baby races. So people care about the celebrities and they're racing. It's gonna get dirty too. Derrick Rose's kid is just going to punch Riley Curry in the face, and it's just,
Jeez.
Man, it's going to be intense.
I'll tell you what, man. This is what I'm going to say as John Gruden. We see Air Bud's kid, Lil Bud, go up against Riley Curry. They got two great speed, great fundamentalism. I think it's going to be a race for the ages. I think Lil Bud, though, a little too quick, those quick little paws. I got Lil Bud beating Riley Curry.
I can't argue with that. Lil Bud, he's survived his father's drug problems.
Man.
To get through them, and I think this little lab, pretty fast little guy.
I think we should combine the celebrity baby races with the amazing race. Let's make it a scavenger hunt around towns. How will the babies sabotage each other? What's gonna happen? Lil Bud and Riley Curry together on the same team? That's just a dynamic duo I don't want to mess with, man.
Who's getting distracted? Who's looking at the shiny Christmas lights, and who's actually eyes on the prize? We got to see who's focused here. We got to see who really wants it. Does the celebrity baby want it, or does Air Bud's kid want it to save his dad's legacy?
Save his dad's legacy and bring hope to Lil Buds everywhere.
Lil Bud, he just he's trying not to go into the same problem as his hero Air Bud, and R.I.P. Air. It was a great run for him, but he couldn't handle it. That golden retriever, man, touched the hearts of many Americans. I love this country, man.
I love this country too, man. I don't even know. Air Bud was an inspiration to me growing up, and he's the reason why I steer clear, and I'm just trying to be a positive role model for my community, and Riley Curry's going to take it. Lil Bud's not getting anything.
Speaking of positive role models, David, you would be one that would really, really enjoy Jersey Shore.
Mike, the Situation Sorrentino came from nothing. His dad's been playing hide and go seek with him for over 32 years now, and his dad's a champ right now.
So David's going to be on the new edition of Jersey Shore. Check out that next fall on HBO. Well, when we come back, we got the final rundown. This is the Spill Sports Show. Stay with us. It's the final rundown. It's the rundown, Scotty. What are you doing?
Copyright.
We're listening to the Spill Sports Show. Welcome into our final segment, the final rundown, where each host has 30-second rant, and the other hosts each get a 30-second rebuttal on each topic. It's crunch time, and things are about to get heated. David, you're on the clock.
Now, while I am disappointed that Damian Lillard didn't make the All-Star game, I am extremely, extremely happy that Isaiah Thomas made the All-Star game. Isaiah Thomas, he was the very last draft pick. He's been in the league for 4 years now. He was drafted by Sacramento. Then he went over, now he's at the Celtics. 21.5 points a game, 6.5 assists a game, a steal a game, 89% from the free throw line. And he has just carried this team offensively because they are a very good defensive team, but they don't have that great go-to guy. But I'll tell you what, Isaiah Thomas is really starting to emerge as that, and he's a little 5'9" guy scoring 21.5 points a game. He belongs in the league and in the All-Star game.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you on that one, David. Isaiah Thomas, and it's nice to see that it's not some other big-name player who is getting in because of his name, not because of his stats. NBA needs to lean towards more of that kind of voting based on a player's performance throughout the season, not just because he's a big-name player.
You know, I wish my Suns had kept Isaiah Thomas. I know the three-point guard system didn't really work, but Isaiah Thomas has just played fantastic since he went to Boston. I think that's the product of some of Brad Stevens' great coaching. I think Brad Stevens is one of the most, probably the most underrated coach in the NBA, and I think definitely one of the best coaches in the NBA. I think Isaiah Thomas has really blossomed underneath him, and I think he will continue to do so. Glad he got the All-Star nomination. Scotty, you're on the clock.
Well, boys, a lot of people are picking Carolina Panthers to dominate in the Super Bowl, and quite frankly, that makes me angry. That makes me sad. That gets me fired up. And I'm going to say this right now. The Denver Broncos won't get blown out again in a Super Bowl like they did against Seattle. This is a Denver Bronco team that is battle-tested. Played Pittsburgh twice. They played Kansas City twice. They beat New England twice. They beat the Green Bay Packers. This is a Denver defense that is hungry, that wants a Super Bowl ring for the sheriff himself, Peyton Manning. I'm fired up. I think Denver's going to get it done.
Let me tell you the biggest difference about that matchup between Denver and the Seahawks versus Denver and the Panthers in this one. Denver had the number one offense versus Seattle's number one defense. Seattle torched him. Now it's Denver's number one defense versus Carolina's number one offense. Will we see this? Will we see the reversal of roles here? Will the number one defense prevail again? I think it's very possible, and we'll break it down a little bit more next week on our Super Bowl preview.
Now, I'm not expecting this game to be a blowout. I hope Peyton Manning does go out on the right foot. Hopefully not the one he had the injury on. But I'll tell you, I think the Panthers are going to win, and Cam Newton is going to be dabbing Peyton Manning all the way to Peyton Manning's retirement home because Peyton Manning is done after this, and Cam Newton will be dabbing with Peyton Manning as he wheels him in the retirement home. All right, and Matt, you're on the clock.
Novak Djokovic has played just out of his mind lately. He is the world number one, and he is getting better and better and better with age. Still playing at the top of his game. He has Federer's number. Every time you see Djokovic versus Federer in a major final, you think, maybe Federer has a shot with all those major titles. Federer's not that old in the tennis world. You know, Federer had the opportunity to overtake Djokovic multiple times, but Djokovic just keeps getting better and better and better every single match. And with his serve, he has continued to play amazing. And his return game, he's really worked on it, really improved, and really stepped up to prove that number one ranking.
And you know, Roger Federer, I feel like I've been watching him play since I was a 4-year-old. The guy's been around for what seems to be 15, 20 years, and the guy just keeps playing. Really happy to see Djokovic play at his peak right now, but I'm a Federer guy. I loved watching Federer back in the day. It breaks my heart seeing him lose time and time again to Novak Djokovic, but Djokovic, better than Nadal, better than Federer. He's just the best in the world right now, boys.
Yeah, I agree with that, but it makes me sad, though, because Roger Federer is the reason why I even remotely started watching tennis. I remember watching Rafael Nadal versus Roger Federer. Those matchups were just legendary. The two just great competitors going back and forth. So I'm really sad to see a downward spiral of Roger Federer. He's now down to, I believe, number 3 in the world. But I tell you what, Novak Djokovic is just going to keep playing at the top of his game, and I'd expect a lot more Grand Slams from him in the near future.
And that's all the time we have for today, folks. We'll be back next Friday at 1 p.m. on KRNU2. Until then, enjoy your weekend, stay healthy, and go Big Red.
Spill Sports Show with Matt Reynoldson, David Eickholt, and Scott Ayers. Never miss a show again. Check out our podcast at thespillkrnu.wordpress.com.
The 76ers could have drastically improved their organization by drafting Walter Pitchford.
Quite frankly, if he wins a Super Bowl, I'll direct it 30 for 30 on it.
I've watched this kid play multiple times on national television.
You like watching kids, David?
Dude, I love basketball. Excuse me.
The Spill Sports Show, every Friday from 1 to 3 on KRNU2.